surprised by the way we looked. The years had changed us too. We smiled and both embraced.
Hello again. Welcome to another Gung Ho show. It's September 21st, 2020. I'm Joseph Giannini. I think you know me, but I'll remind you, I'm a Marine that served in Vietnam. I was a criminal defense lawyer for over 40 years, and I've been producing this show for 16 years. And I've been off a while because of the COVID thing, but I'm back. I wanted to give you the scoop on Eden. I mean, you've seen her around now for maybe 3 years. Eden is not my dog. She belongs to a neighbor of mine, Dao Spencer. Dao was born in Vietnam. She came here when she was 17 years old. She's now in her mid-80s. Eden is a service dog. She was trained, and for a blind person, she passed all her training, and then she was given to a blind person. About a year later, the blind person returned her and claimed that she had a problem with going on public transportation. So what they do with the returned service dogs, they put them up for sale. And Dow waited maybe 3 years for a dog to come up, and she paid money, a lot of money for Eden, and she had decided to give Eden to her grandson, and she did. The grandson was down in South Carolina. So Eden went from being very well trained, passing all her training, given to a blind person, returned, and then basically put up for adoption for a fee. Eden was given to her Dow's grandson, and after a year, the family didn't want Eden. This is crazy. And Dow went down to South Carolina and brought her back here. That was in 2017. And the first day she brought Eden back by plane, she came to see me, and I was surprised to see Dow with a big dog like this. And she said to me, "Joe, you could take Eden anytime you want." That was 3 years ago. Well, I take Eden every day, and I keep her all day. Sometimes Dow goes away for months at a time to visit her children in California and South Carolina, so Eden stays with me and my family 3 or 4 months at a time. So Eden, we share Eden, and she really is man and woman's best friend. As you can see, she's very attached to me and Dow, and when she lays down or sits down, she makes sure that she has contact. Like right now, she's leaning on my left foot. See if I can get her up. Eden, come on, Eden, Eden, up. Hey, up, come on. She'll get up for a treat. Come here, girl. She stretches a lot. Come here. All right. I love dogs, and I've always had, my whole life, starting as a teenager, I guess, big dogs. And she's a big girl. And the funny thing is, Dow didn't know this about me, but even in Vietnam, I adopted a pup. I mean, a really small pup, maybe about 5 or 6 weeks old. I adopted the pup and became my dog in Vietnam. And I'll bring in a photo of the dog, Red Baron, sometime. But every day, I take her for a walk, either on the ocean side or on the bay side. We walk for about an hour and a half. She's in great shape. She loves to play with other dogs, and she loves people. So anyhow, all right, I'm going to move on to something more serious. Years ago, I started tracking what I call draft dodgers. Maybe it was when Bush 43 was president. I have a particular attitude about draft dodgers based on who they are and what they've done after they've draft dodged. So I've kept a file on some of the prominent draft dodgers. I'll start with Bush. Bush, during the Vietnam War, because of his father's money and connections, was able to go into, I guess it was the Air Force Reserve. Everybody knew then that reservists were not being called up for the Vietnam War, that Johnson had instituted a draft, so they were rounding up all the draftees, which were mostly lower class and middle class boys, a lot of boys, I call them boys, from the ghetto, from the rural country, blacks, poor Latinos, poor whites, and people that had connections. I called them the fortunate sons, were able to get out of the draft. Starting with Bush, he must have had maybe 4 or 5 deferments, never went to war. That was his way to get out, go in the reserve. Clinton really disappeared for a long time. I think he got 6, 7, or 8 deferments. Never served. Now you got to remember this. Every time someone gets a deferment, someone goes in their place. So if Bush had, say, 4 deferments, 4 people went in his place, and the odds are that at least one of them was killed, probably 2 were seriously wounded, and maybe 1 came back or 2 came back okay. Not really, because they have been exposed to Agent Orange. Same thing with Clinton. If he got 8 deferments, which I think he got, 8 people went in his place. Probably 3 were killed, and at least maybe 2 or 3 more wounded. They all came back with invisible wounds, including being exposed to Agent Orange and PTSD. Those weren't even phrases that we knew back then when we served. Cheney, I found a cartoon about Cheney. Remember him? Vice President under Bush, and served as Secretary of Defense under Bush 41. And someone did a cartoon. I'll just read it to you and show it to you. 1 deferment, 2 deferments, 3 deferments more. Gun lover, super patriot, never went to war. I found this in a newspaper. And his main thing is he had some kind of skin infection, and he got deferments because of a skin infection. I never heard such a thing. Giuliani, you heard of him, another fortunate son. He got 4 deferments for going to college, and then he got 3 more deferments for going to law school. That's 7. And then he got something very unusual. He got a deferment, his 8th deferment, because he clerked for a federal judge. And I did find an article about him in the newspapers about that strange fact, getting a deferment because he was clerking for a federal judge. And he went on to become a very famous prosecutor, and now he's Trump's lawyer. He was really a very good, an excellent prosecutor. I know firsthand. He came down hard on the mafia when he was a prosecutor. He was leading the Southern District of New York. And he actually has done a good job representing Trump. Trump, another fortunate son, actually went on the Howard Stern show and told Howard Stern the most dangerous thing that he had to worry about during the Vietnam War was getting a sexually transmitted disease. That's it. Never served. So it's strange how they go on Uh, Most of them have gone on to become the President of the United States and the Commander-in-Chief, and they've never served, and they've gone out of their way to never serve. President Trump, according to many of my Marine friends that made it back, and many that from different wars actually, from Vietnam, from the first war in Iraq, the second war in Iraq, and Afghanistan, many of my friends call Trump President Bone Spurs. I never heard of such a thing, getting out because of having a big bone spur. Believe it or not, I have a big bone spur right there. And I never thought about using it to get out of going in. I went in because, actually volunteered to go in the Marines because I thought it was the right thing to do, serve your country. And I found out the hard way that they lied to us about Vietnam. I was already in Vietnam, leading a rifle platoon when I realized that we weren't fighting for freedom or democracy, and we weren't fighting, I'm looking at the wrong camera, we weren't fighting communists to stop them there so we wouldn't have to fight them here. That was all lies. And what happened is every time someone was killed, or someone's were killed, we wrapped them in their own ponchos. And this is a photograph here of a soldier wrapped in his own poncho. And you can see his friend looking down at him, and another friend looking for a chopper coming in to take him away. And that was standard operating procedure. They chop it out the dead as soon as possible. I guess they believed if they weren't there, they were out of mind. And most of the times it worked. So we wrapped up our dead Marines in their ponchos and put them on a chopper as fast as possible. And they started their long journey home. And after a while, I coined the term because every Marine that came into the unit, and soldiers too, they had a rotation date. So they would join the unit, and we all had different rotation dates. So I coined the term or phrase, poncho rotation. I never said it out loud, but now I talk about it. Poncho rotation was the worst thing that could happen to anyone. That means you were going back home in your own poncho. You start the trip back home in your own poncho. And I found out just recently, because we had a guest on the show, George Motz. During the Vietnam War, for the first time, they started having officers become what they call casualty notification officers. And these officers had to go out to the family or the next of kin of everyone that was killed in Vietnam. And he got that duty during the Vietnam War, George Motz, down in South Carolina. So his what you call a job mission was to notify each family in person and then stay with the family, see them every single day, and help them with every single detail about the death of their son or daughter. That meant he was there to let them know the son was killed, and he was there when the son or daughter was put in the ground. He was there for all the services and all the award ceremonies. And the shocking thing was, to me, that the body wasn't returned for 21 days. I always had this image that the dead were home within a few days of being killed. Not true. The family knew they were dead almost immediately, maybe 24 hours between the death, but they didn't see the body or get the body for 21 more days. That's horrible. I think it's a lot faster now. All right. So I find it ironic that so many of our presidents have never served, and we have to call them commander-in-chief. But it's also good that some of our best presidents served. In fact, our very first president, George Washington, served 2 terms, and I think they wanted, our senators and congressmen wanted him to serve a 3rd term, and he said, no, I'm not doing a 3rd term. So we've had our very first president was maybe our greatest president served. General Eisenhower, of course, led us to victory in the Second World War. He served. George Bush, 41, he went into the Navy when he was 17 years old, got shot down over the Pacific. So in my opinion, serving in whatever, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Army, is a good thing if you want to be the commander-in-chief. And I'm of the opinion that anybody that wants to run for federal office should serve. Man or woman should serve. Go on active duty for 4 years. That be a requirement. You want to run for federal office, you have to serve first, then you could run. Then you wouldn't have these draft dodgers running for office like right now. Trump, a draft dodger running for office, and making fun of how we got out of it. I hate to say this, but even Biden didn't serve. He got 4 or 5 deferments, 4 for being a student and 1 for asthma. I don't like that. But he's got plenty of service as a congressman, as a senator, as a vice president. So he's much more informed and much more experienced than Trump. I guess you know who I'm going to vote for. All right. The other thing I wanted to talk about is another big issue. It started now. It started to get its traction with Black Lives Matter about police misconduct and corruption in the criminal justice system. But I know firsthand that what's happening now has happened for, I guess, when people were first enslaved. Killing, torture, under the color of law. And I started experiencing it firsthand when I started practicing law in 1973. I started with the Legal Aid Criminal Defense Division, so I came straight up in contact with police misconduct and detective misconduct, prosecutorial misconduct, judge misconduct, and it involves sometimes killing black people. It involves framing them, and the frames would have to be coordinated, you might say, because if a detective frames somebody and he's going to be prosecuted, then the prosecutor is in on it, and the judge is usually in on it. And I was up against that from the very beginning of my career, fighting that. So I'm happy now that it's coming out, that it's getting traction. Because killing a black person for a long time, even a poor white or a poor Latino, almost all the time the police got a pass for that. But I want to talk about one of my murder cases in the short time we have. You could see what they could do. I was involved in the boxing business starting in the early 80s. And one of my first fighters was a guy by the name of Miguel Blackie Hernandez. He was in my stable. He was a very good fighter. And Miguel's brother, well, I got a call from a detective by the name of John Medina saying that he was looking for Miguel's brother for a murder. And I said to him, Medina, if you have enough evidence, I'll bring him in voluntarily, which I did. He said, I have enough. I have 2 eyewitnesses. So I brought him in. I surrendered him. I went to the precinct with Fernando Hernandez. And I told Medina, don't question him. You know he's got a lawyer, and don't put him in a lineup unless you contact me and I'm present. So I left. I left Fernando Hernandez with Detective Medina. He was arrested for murder. Turns out Medina put him in a lineup. Turns out Fernando got indicted for murder. And while the case was pending in Supreme Court, Kings County, I got some discovery and I got the statements of the eyewitnesses. And they were taken by Detective Medina. He had typed them out and the witnesses had signed them. And I read through the statements. I went to see Fernando. He was being held without bail on the murder case. And I said, I've never seen such perfect statements. You're dead. They've got you. They've got two witnesses. They're brothers. They're twins. And the witnesses, if the statements are true, you can't go to trial. So he said to me, Mr. Giannini, work out a plea. I did. I worked out a plea to manslaughter in the first degree, 8 to 16 years. He agreed to take it. The prosecutor agreed to take it. The judge agreed to let it go. So in open court, everybody knew he was going to take a plea. So I went down to see him. He was being held, to tell him, yes, you're going to get the plea. Come on back up. You'll take the plea. Went back up to the courtroom in front of a really good judge, a really incredibly good judge. He was the former head of the Kings County Homicide Bureau. And I said, my client's ready to take the plea. Judge says, I'm ready. And the DA says, we're withdrawing the offer. I'd never seen that happen. They withdrew the offer after making the offer. Judge Aiello got really mad. All right, the case is going to trial now. So now, case is put over, I got to get ready for trial. And I go out to see the young witnesses for the first time with my investigator. And we go to their home, and his mom, the mother was there, and I'm about to question him, and I start the questioning, and I start to realize that there's something wrong here. It turns out they're handicapped. They're special. They really can't put a sentence together. So I said, what about these statements? And both of them, they were teenagers, said, well, Medina wrote the statements out. That's what he wrote, and he told us to sign them. Whoa. All right, so we go back to court. Now the trial's going forward. Before any trial, there's always pretrial hearings to determine the admissibility of evidence. In this case, the admissibility of the lineup evidence. And the judge, and the prosecutor was accusing me and my investigator of tampering with the witnesses. So we have a hearing. They combine it. The judge says, okay, we'll have a Savoy hearing about your alleged misconduct of Mr. Giannini, and we'll have a hearing to determine the admissibility of the lineup evidence. So we go forward. Next thing would be the trial. They put one of the eyewitnesses on the stand, and he's testifying, did you witness a lineup? The prosecutor's asking the question. The witness says, the young boy says, yes. Did you pick out a number in the lineup? Young boy says, yes. He said, what number did you pick out? He said, well, I picked out number 5. And he said, why'd you pick out number 5? Now, he's supposed to say, because that's the guy I saw, do the murder. He said, well, Detective Medina told me to pick out number 5. Uh-oh. Very bad for Medina, for the prosecution. Now they put one of the detectives that ran the lineup on the stand. And during cross-examination, I asked the detective, did you pay the witnesses any money? And he says, yes. How much? We paid them $50. I said, why would you pay the witnesses $50? Well, we gave them $50 to go have lunch at McDonald's. Next witness on the stand was Detective Medina, and I asked him the same question during cross. Did the witnesses get any money? And he says, yes, they did. Because he now realized something's going wrong here. How much? I don't know. You were detective in charge. It was your case, yes. Your witnesses were given money. Yes. At the day of the lineup, yes. Before or after? After. Anyhow, Judge Aiello swiveled in his chair and looked at him like, you are a piece of Medina. Get down off the stand. Got down. The murder case was dismissed right then and there. Didn't go to trial. And, well, of course, everybody knew, and I knew, my client was the murderer. He did kill this drug dealer. And he got off scot-free because he was framed for a murder that he didn't do. And that was the end of Medina. Medina was investigated by the special prosecutor. He resigned in disgrace. And he was, believe it or not, he was involved in the drug trade too. And I know for sure he was. I mean, I've got the proof. I found out, I got the proof years later. But there you go. Detectives and prosecutors and sometimes judges could do whatever they want to whoever they want. And that's the way it really is, and it still is. All right, I'm going to sign off for now. I got an important guest coming, and next time you see me,
Old time.